the Bill Murray. Please welcome to the stage, Joe Welsh. Thank you. Hello. Thank you all for coming. Are you well? Good. Thank you for coming. The show is called I Am Autistic. My name is Joe Wells. I am an autistic man. Are there other autistic people in? A few. The rest of you, don't worry. It takes a while for the vaccines to kick in. But another couple of years, we'll all be autistic, won't we? It'll be a lot better. The trains will run on time. It'll be good. So it's now a long show. We're recording for Go Faster Stripe. A few sort of bits of admin. People, I know how stressful it is as an autistic person being in the middle of a sort of comedy performance like this. Do what you need to do to feel comfortable. People are welcome to stim during the show. Where I've found out from previous gigs, stim is quite an autism-specific term. If you need to move your hands or whatever you need to do to sort of self-regulate, that's completely fine. There's some confusion in a preview of the show. I said stim. Someone thought it meant wanking. I should clarify, this is a no wanking show. Yeah, I'm inclusive, but to a point, you know? You gotta draw the line somewhere. But I don't know what the temperature's gonna be like. If it's too hot, if it's too cold, take off or put on whatever you need to do, that's fine. I had this a bit at the Edinburgh Fringe. We had the most industrial strength air conditioning. It was incredible. One thing happened during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, a week into the run. However air conditioning works, I assume there's like a tube that goes outside, they suck in air, cool it down, pump it into the room. Wherever the tube goes outside, about a week into the festival, someone's smoking a spliff outside. That gets pumped into my venue. Around the 30-minute mark, the show got a lot funnier. So, can't promise that tonight, but you never know. Sometimes you see a show and the comedians like pick on the audience and make fun of them, ask them what they do for a living. I don't give a shit what you do for a living. I do not care about you or your lives. So you can relax, don't worry about that. You don't need to do anything as well, you don't need to say anything. Sometimes I will ask questions, but that's just the sort of style of comedy that I do. All my questions I ask, they're rhetorical questions. Do you all know what rhetorical questions are? Some of you failed that test. But that's okay. But just relax, enjoy the show in whatever way you need to enjoy the show. It's completely fine. The show's about my brother. Now, my brother is not autistic, but he's very severely not autistic. You know, he's got all the symptoms. He can't have a conversation unless he's making eye contact. He can't relax unless you put him in a loud, crowded place. He's shit at maths. That last one's true. It's a stereotype, isn't it? It's a stereotype that non-autistic people are all bad at maths. I know that. A lot of you can be really good at maths. You know, with the right support, you can achieve anything you want. You're amazing non-autistic people. You inspire me, everyone. I think, in many ways, not being autistic is like a superpower. I do think that. My brother is not autistic, right? But he went to university. Which, I think that's an incredible achievement for a non-autistic person to go to university. I mean, obviously, he had to have, like, a specialist course that was adapted to meet his needs. It was called Film and Media Studies, but he's done very well for himself. See, that there is the best bit of material that I have or will ever write. It doesn't really work in the tour shows because at least half the audience have already seen it. But the reason for that is I wrote that material in the first lockdown, did it on stage first gig back between the lockdowns, got a video of me doing on stage, put that video online, got 2.5 million views, right? Which, yeah, sounds impressive, doesn't it? But what you need to remember is a lot of the people who follow me on social media are other autistic people. 2.5 million views. That means it was viewed 2.5 million times. Not necessarily by 2.5 million people. Could have just been 4 of our lot who really liked it, but it all counts. It was stressful having a viral video. Had some backlash. Some people saying that I shouldn't call my brother not autistic. That's not the correct term. I should say my brother, he is a person with an autism deficiency. That's what you meant to call them. The other thing I had a bit, some people didn't believe that I was really autistic, and their argument was this. They went, I don't think he is autistic because he's doing stand-up comedy. Which is a weird take, isn't it? Because think about what stand-up comedy is. What's the job description of a stand-up comedian? You have to be able to have a long, one-way conversation covering your special interests. Occasionally, not here, but like a rowdy Friday night gig, someone might heckle. I then have to say something back to them which must be socially inappropriate. And then I can go back to talking about my special interests. before going back to a quiet room. I can do this. I've been training for this my whole life. And the other thing happened, about 200,000 views in, I get a phone call from my agent. She says she's had an email from the Mail Online, which if you don't know what the Mail Online is, it's the online version of Mein Kampf. And she said... She said the Mail Online have emailed. They want to put your video on the Mail Online website. I said, no, thank you. I don't want my video to be on the Mail Online website. Hung up the phone, saw that had a text that said, hi, Joe, did you know that your video is on the Mail Online website? That's fine. I don't care. They can do what they want. It's a public video. Don't know why they asked. Right. Half an hour later, they emailed again. They were like, right, we've put his video up. We'd like to do an interview with Joe about his comedy. I said, no, thank you. I don't want to do an interview with the Mail Online. An hour later, genuinely true, I get a phone call from my dad saying, hi, Joe. Just had the Mail Online on the phone to me, asking about your brother. You don't have a brother. What the fuck is going on? I don't have a brother, okay? Not everything comedians tell you is true. The full facts are, I am autistic, properly diagnosed and everything, so if you heckle me, technically that is a hate crime, just be aware of that. I have a non-autistic sister, but when I wrote that material, I changed it. I say I've got a brother instead of a sister, because I think good comedy should challenge stereotypes. And I wanted to challenge the stereotype that it's only women who can be not autistic. It's a big community of non-autistic men, but it often goes undiagnosed in men, because men are much better at pretending not to understand people's feelings. So that happened in my lockdown. It's a weird thing. We have a thing in this country where if you're from any minority group and you get a bit of social media attention, you are then a spokesperson for that group, whether you want to be or not, which is stressful, you know? I was getting invited to Autism Awareness Month events. I hate Autism Awareness Month. This is my issue with it. Why do we get awareness? All the other months are good things. All the other months, you've got Black History Month. Know your history, know where you're coming from, study important people from history, that's a good thing to do. LGBT Pride Month. Be proud of who you are. Don't let anyone tell you to be ashamed of who you are. That's a good thing. Autism Awareness Month. Watch out! There could be autism anywhere. Remember to check your bonfires for autism. Never know where it's going to be, but it was a weird situation. You know, I was getting invited to do acting auditions to play autistic characters. I had one come through for a TV show, which is out now. I won't name it, but the character description, this was the description of the character I've got auditioned for. It says, this character has autism and or a learning disability. Those are two different things. You could be and, you could be or, but you can't be and or those two things. That's not a character. It's like saying this character is a geography teacher and or Lebanese. Well, which one is he? It was a very weird time, stressful time. And it was stressful anyway. You know, I found lockdown very hard. I think I had it easier than most people. I locked down with my wife, just the two of us. She's amazing, by the way. She is, I tell you about her. She's bisexual, which I think is incredible, because that means she could have married a woman, but she chose this. That's like me, someone who can afford to shop at Waitrose, but chooses to eat out of bins. That's my wife. It's very hard to respect her. She had a choice of all the genders in this new world, and she went, I'll have that one, please. I'll have one of them. I'll have a fat Mickey Flanagan. That's what I want. Yes, please. But she's good, but we're both quite anxious people. She has like sort of clinical anxiety. She gets intrusive, anxious thoughts that bad things are going to happen to people she cares about, which is really difficult for her. She was given this tip. I'll share this with you now. This is not a joke. This is a free anxiety tip. If any of you get anxious, you can go away, use this tip in your life. She was told, if you have an intrusive, anxious thought that something bad's going to happen, what you can do is you can sing that anxious thought out loud to the tune of a silly pop song. That makes the thought seem ridiculous, and it diffuses the power of that anxious thought, right? Not saying it's fixed everything. She still gets quite anxious, but as a little tip, she's found that helpful. Like I said, not a joke, just a free anxiety tip. If any of you get anxious, you can use that in your life. Been genuinely helpful for my wife. What it has meant for me is that occasionally I'll be woken up in the morning by my wife singing, Joe's gonna die in a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack! He's never coming back! And that's bad for my anxiety. It's very stressful. It's like having an alarm clock made by ISIS. It's stressful. Yeah? The lockdown was hard, you know, even though I had ease in other people, it was still very difficult. All my gigs came out the diary, couldn't do any live comedy during lockdown, which was stressful. Lost all my income from that. Hard enough, but 2 months before the lockdown, I went for pizza with my friend. I paid for the pizza. He sent me his share of the pizza money via bank transfer. Now, when you send money on the internet, there's a little box that says reference. In that reference box, you're meant to put what the money is for. So you should put dinner, pizza, something like that. But as a little joke, in that reference box, my friend, sending me £7.50 for pizza, wrote the words dog cum refund, right? That's fine. It's a bit of fun between friends. When you send money to friends on the internet, loads of you have done it. In the reference box, instead of putting what the money's for, you put the rudest thing you can think of. A little bit of fun between friends. If you haven't done it before, do it in future. A lot of fun. But 2 months after he did that, we had a global pandemic. I lost all of my income. I found out my local council had a grant that I could apply for if I'd lost money due to the pandemic. As part of the application process for that grant, I have to submit my bank statement for the previous year. Long story short, my local council now think that not only am I buying dog cum, but I am such a connoisseur of dog cum. Occasionally I'll get a batch, doesn't quite meet my standards. Just send it back, get a dog cum refund. I panicked, I put a little note on it which said, this was for pizza, and I feel like I made it worse. I should have just put nothing at all. It was a very stressful time, lockdown, you know. I say all my gigs come out the diary, got to do Zoom gigs, right? That's a tough gig for a comedian, doing stand-up comedy, but on a Zoom call, yeah? I had the most hurtful heckle of my life on a Zoom comedy show. It hurt deep. It's what it sounds like, doing stand-up comedy on a Zoom call. Got a 20-minute set. About 5 minutes into my 20-minute set, I can hear someone else on the Zoom call. They didn't heckle as such, but I can clearly hear they've turned on their television. That's deep. I listen closer. I can hear what they're watching on TV. They didn't put on a drama or a documentary, something like that. I could cope with that. They put on Live at the Apollo. That's not someone going, not in the mood for comedy. That's someone going, I'm in the mood for better comedy, please. I think my point was the lockdown was stressful. You know, I hope I can share with you. I had some days during the lockdown where I felt a complete emptiness and complete sense of hopelessness and anger. I felt angry, like I hated everyone outside of my house. And then I'd have other days where I didn't go on Facebook. But I think social media is bad for our mental health, but not for the reasons people say. People say social media is bad for your mental health because everybody is putting on their best self on social media. That makes you feel inadequate because you're not as good as the people on social media. I think the opposite of that is true. I think people are so fucking horrible and angry and racist on social media. That makes me feel sad about the world, yeah? Look at the comments on anything on Facebook. People threaten to kill each other over nothing. It's horrible. It's pure id, isn't it? Do you know what id is? It's like a Freudian thing. Freud said the id is the primal part of the mind that wants to eat and fight and fuck and kill. And then you've got the ego and the superego that goes, don't do that. You're in a job interview. I think it's unleashed a pure id on our society, social media. I don't think we can undo that, you know? People are angry all the time. Not angry with the people they should be angry with, in my opinion, as well. They're angry with... At the moment, they're angry with the refugees. I don't know why they're angry with the refugees. I like the refugees. I'm on their side. Don't know a lot about them, really. All I know is this. They're in dinghies. And I have a rule. If you're in a dinghy, I'm on your side. Whatever the circumstances, I'm on the side of the people in the dinghies. There's no good dinghy stories, yeah? If you're in a dinghy, you're either fleeing a war-torn country or you're dumping a body for a member of the royal family. Those are the only two reasons that dinghies exist, and... I just don't know how people can be so angry. They haven't got the lifeboat charities. They got a load of shit for rescuing refugees, yeah? The argument was, they were saying, well, if the lifeboat charity rescue the refugees, it will encourage people to make bad decisions. Let me ask you a question. Who do you think the lifeboat charity was rescuing the rest of the time? Do you think it's people who've made good decisions that day? It's not. It's some rich prick who's bought a yacht he can't sail and taken it out in a fucking hurricane. That's who the lifeboat charity is for. And I think the lifeboat charity should only rescue refugees. Let the other fuckers drown. I'm sorry. Sorry if that's a little bit right-wing, but if you thought you could sail to France on an inflatable unicorn, we don't need you. We'll take that Albanian guy instead, or we don't need you anymore. It makes me sad, people going for the refugees. You know, I just can't. They're risking their lives to get to Kent. If you've been to Kent, it's shit. Every place is worse than Kent, and I just don't. And I know they're not going through the proper systems. I get that. There's proper systems you're meant to go through to come into the country, claim asylum, fill in forms, stuff like that. I get that, but they're risking their lives, so I think there should be a little bit of leeway. You know, like you've all been through the proper systems to be here tonight. You've got to buy a ticket, show your ticket on the door. There's systems to get into this room, right? If we found out someone in the front row hadn't gone through the proper systems, they hadn't bought a ticket, we'd be annoyed about that, and we'd be right to be annoyed about that. But if we then found out that how they'd snuck in is they tunnelled him from Charing Cross. Wow. You really wanted to see the show, didn't you? I think we'd let him stay, and just the whole barrage of social media I find upsetting. I'm not saying social media is all bad, you know. I have a friend who, because of social media, he's a lot happier, so that's good for him. What he's done, he used to be very anxious, not anymore. He started to believe in conspiracy theories, and he's a lot happier than any of us will ever be. And I tried. I wanted to believe in conspiracy theories. I saw how they helped him. Don't believe any of them. Very far-fetched. Watched all the YouTube videos. Don't believe them. Very out there. But I wish I did. I wish I believed in conspiracy theories. They sound great, you know? They're comforting. That's why they're popular. They're comforting thoughts in quite a frightening world. For example, here's one he believes, right? Get this. He believes our government has a plan... Isn't that adorable? That's really sweet. I wish I believed that. I think that's a lovely thing to believe, but I don't. There's no conspiracy he can come out with which is as scary as the real things I'll see on the news. So he'll say things to me like, Joe, did you know the reason we've got vaccines is because the NHS has been run by devil-worshipping, Zionist, paedophile lizards? And I hear that and go, oh, thank God for that. Yeah. Do you remember it used to be Matt Hancock, didn't it? So let's give the pedo lizards a chance, see how they do. Oh, they're bad. I wish there was like someone controlling everything. That'd be great, you know, put the lizards in charge, great, you know. Because the reality is that there's a few very volatile, angry, chaotic, mainly men sort of controlling things. And that's frightening, you know. I don't watch the news anymore. I find it distressing. Less obviously chaotic now, but it's been a chaotic year. With Liz Truss for a little bit. I thought Liz Truss was a bad Prime Minister, but now we know she was a Russian spy, I think she did a good job. 44 days! That's all it took her, 44 days. She got in, killed the Queen, tanked the economy, got out again. Incredibly efficient. I think Putin should give her a pay rise. I think she did a good job, well done. And obviously during the lockdown, we had Boris in charge, and that was just really frightening, seeing when the news was really chaotic. There'd be a new sort of like story each week of just something like very frighteningly chaotic and incompetently done. The one I remember most, do you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a story where Boris Johnson had gone into a hospital, he'd met some COVID patients, and he'd shaken hands with all the COVID patients. That was a real thing that our Prime Minister did. And he would never go on the news for anything, so they get Edwina Currie. She goes on the news to defend Boris Johnson shaking hands with the COVID patients, right? This is her defence of Boris Johnson shaking hands with COVID patients. See what you think that's right. She goes, well, when Boris Johnson shook hands with the COVID patients, he was actually mirroring how in the 80s, Princess Diana had gone into the AIDS wards and shaken hands with all the AIDS patients. It's not the same at all. That's not in any way comparable. Why? Because AIDS can't be transmitted by a handshake. So when Princess Diana did that, it was a really important and powerful statement about stigma. Whatever you think of her, it's a good thing she did that. Probably saved lives. But COVID, you could transmit by getting that close to someone. So it's just not comparable in any way. If Princess Diana, in the 80s, had gone into the AIDS wards... Okay, we have a situation here where I'm going to say 60% of the people in the room know where that's going. I'm looking around, I can see some people looking at me going, well, that joke hasn't finished yet, so I'll wait for the punchline. I'll leave it there. That's my little gift to you. There'll be some couples in where one of you got it and the other one didn't. I want you to have to explain it to the other one after the show. That's my gift. But yeah, it was a frightening few years. I found lockdown and the sort of subsequent stuff really stressful and scary. In the middle of it, I was made a spokesperson for all autistic people, which was stressful. And a role model. People say to me on the internet, they go, you're a role model for young autistic people. I'm not a role model to young autistic people. What I am is a man whose job it is to talk about dog cum to people who are drinking on Mother's Day. That's my role in society. And too much, by the way. My agent came to see the show. She had one bit of feedback. That feedback was, you talk about dog cum too much throughout the show. There's at least 2 or 3 more callbacks to that bit. Look forward to that, because I don't want to be a role model. I don't think that should be what I've got to be. All sorts of questions getting asked. People ask me, what's it like being autistic? That's what people want to know, what's it like being autistic, which is a difficult question to answer, you know, because partly I've only known for about 4 years, you know. Obviously, there was lots of clues growing up, you know. I always found eye contact really sort of uncomfortable. I didn't know why. I found social situations really confusing and overwhelming. My mum used to run a support group for parents of autistic children. Looking back, that was the big one, really. I should have picked up on that. But I'm trying to think, what's it like being autistic? That's why the show is called I'm Autistic. I thought I'd try and put some of it into a show. Also, because occasionally people will say to me, you shouldn't say you're autistic, Joe. What you are is a person with autism. People think it's like more politically correct to say person with autism, not autistic. I don't like it. I like autistic. It's direct, it's all in one. Person with autism is separating the person from who they are. I don't like that. I like autistic. It's good, it's direct, it works, you know? If someone works in a coffee shop, I call them a barista. I wouldn't call them a person with a theatre degree. I'd call them, they are. What is it like being autistic? I think it's like being in an airport hotel. I went to an airport hotel last year. I had some gigs in Croydon because my career is going well. And slightly complicated story, but I had a voucher for a hotel I had to use up. The only place I could use it was the Travelodge in Gatwick. So I stayed for 2 nights at the Travelodge in Gatwick. I don't know if you've ever stayed at an airport hotel when you're not getting a flight, but you're viewed with suspicion by the staff. They look at you and you can tell they're thinking, what are you doing in that room for 2 nights that you need to be near an airport for? It's a weird experience at the airport hotel, because they have a routine. People will come in, staff will go, how many nights? Customer says, 1 night, here's your key. How many nights? 1 night, here's your key. How many nights? 1 night, here's your key. How many nights? 1 night, here's your key. They get to me, how many nights? I say 2 nights, they look frightened. I liked it. I'm going to go for longer next time. It's good. 10 nights, please. 10 nights at the Travelodge Gatwick. I'll be paying with cash, yes. Done my research, and I think 10 nights is the best amount of time for a holiday. 2 weeks is a little bit too long, a week is not long enough. You want 10 nights at Gatwick. A week to do all the touristy things, try on the perfumes, that sort of thing. Go on the sort of fast-moving walkways, and I just want a few days at the end just to hang out on the North Terminal eating tax-free Toblerones. That's what I want to do. I don't want to be stressed on my holiday. The airport hotel is a fascinating phenomenon, because the only reason anyone, apart from me, is at the airport hotel is they can get a flight. Yeah, it's a good thing they have. You know, if got an early morning flight, you can go up the night before, get a good night's sleep, get up early, go and get your flight. That's why they exist. More or less everyone, they're just there for that reason. But the only identity we have for hotels is the holiday hotel that you go to when you're on holiday. So the airport hotel has to fit itself into the identity of the holiday hotel, but it doesn't quite work. So something's a little bit off. You go in and you can just tell that something's not quite right at the Gatwick Travelodge. You go in, there's a leaflet rack that says, things to do in the local area of Gatwick. That's one thing to do in the local area. You get on an aeroplane, go to a nicer local area. That's what it was like being autistic, I think. For me growing up, there was one version of human being that was presented to me. This is what they look like, this is what they move like, this is what they sound like, this is a human being. It didn't quite work for me. I didn't quite fit into it. Something was a bit odd and off when I tried to fit into it. But that was the only option available. I had to fit into this version of human being. Yeah? I think all the things, at least most of the things I struggle with as an autistic person, boil down to that. Me fitting into a version of human being that didn't quite work for me. For example, when I was younger, I was very, very passionate about things. And I would talk about things I was passionate about as a child for ages. And then grown-ups would say to me, OK, Joe, you've been talking about penguins for an hour now. We are at Nanny's funeral. You should let Grandad talk to someone else. And I got told off for that so much. Got told off for talking about things I was passionate about. I gave myself a rule. The rule was this. If someone asks you about the thing you're passionate about, you can tell them one thing, one fact, one story, and then you have to ask them a question about them, make it look like you're interested in whatever's going on. That was a really important rule. I put it right in my head, really important. Stopped me getting in trouble, kept me safe, helped me to make friends and get on workplaces in the future. If someone asks you about the thing you're passionate about, one thing, then you ask them a question about them. A really important rule. I sort of pushed it into my head. But I think it's made things difficult for me as an adult. I'm really genuinely glad that everyone's here because I find promoting comedy shows really difficult. I'm very passionate about comedy. I love comedy. But when you're doing like a run-up to a tour or a fringe show or something like that, you have to do the press stuff, and I find that hard. For that reason, journalists will phone me up and they'll say, "Hi, Joe. I hear you're working on a new show for the Edinburgh Fringe. What's it about?" And I'll say, "It's about being autistic. Are you working on any good news articles at the moment? Tell me more about your life." I'm trying to write one about an autistic comedian, but he's being weirdly evasive at the moment. I don't know what's going on. Loads of sort of rules and things that I gave myself when I acted naturally. I got told off for it. The other one was the "how are you" rule. People would say to me, "How are you?" as a child. And as a child, when they asked me that, I would tell them how I was, which is illegal. Yeah. Not allowed to do that in this country. If someone says, "How are you?" you say, "I'm fine, thanks, how are you?" It's all you're allowed to say. "I'm fine, thanks, how are you?" "I'm good, thanks, how are you?" All you're allowed to say. "I'm fine, thanks, how are you?" Unless your life is an immediate physical danger. But even then, you have to really play it down as not to burden them. If they say, "How are you?" you are allowed to go, "Well, I'm currently being chased by a lion, actually. It's been after me for a while now. It's doing that sort of crouchy thing that cats do when they're about to go for a mouse, like its shoulders are all up." I don't know what I can do, really, but can't grumble. "How are you?" I don't think the "how are you" rule is a good rule. I don't think it's a good rule for society. I think if we changed that rule so that when you said "how are you," we told people how we are, I think it'd be better for all of us because we'd find out more about each other, we'd learn about each other, we'd get closer to each other. I think there's a lot of people who are vulnerable, and they'd be less vulnerable if we changed that rule. Obviously not all vulnerable people, but I think that a few vulnerable people would be much less vulnerable if we just changed that rule. If you said "how are you," you actually share who you are. I think it would save lives, you know? But don't worry, I still do the "how are you" thing that I was taught, you know? When people say "how are you," I say "I'm fine, thanks." Because I bashed that into my head, even though I think it's a bad rule. It feels uncomfortable to not do that rule, you know? You've got to unlearn a lot of these things. So I've got sort of planning it. I've got to get my hair cut soon. That's when I'm going to do it. I'm going to break the rule. My hairdresser's going to say to me, "How are you?" And I'll say, "Well, some days I feel a complete emptiness inside. I feel a deep sorrow in my chest. It's always there, a sense of sorrow and hopelessness. It feels like it's there in my chest every single day, but it's not always big. It feels like it's just a background thing most of the time. But some days I have bad days where the hopelessness feels like it feels my whole body, feels a sense of sort of hopeless despair. It feels very physical for me. The sense of despair and hopelessness, I just feel like it feels through my whole body. It feels into my head, into my skin. My skin feels that sense of sorrow and hopelessness. Sometimes I can even feel that sense of hopelessness. It goes into my hair, which is about 2 inches too long at the moment. I mean, really, it's that last bit you need to focus on, if I'm honest. I think we need someone else for the rest of it. But how are you? Got to say "how are you" back, otherwise it's rude. I will defend that. But all those sorts of things that I was came naturally to me. I was always getting told off for them growing up, you know. Like, I always found it very stressful at Christmas. We have to go to see my dad's family, right? And there was loads of them, and I just didn't sort of like fit in with them. I'm quite different to them, you know, because I liked art and comedy and music, and they liked football and group chanting and homophobia. Those were their passions. And we just didn't sort of mix it. There'd be a lot of banter, you know, that they sort of make fun of me for being gay, right? Which I'm not. I'm heterosexual. But this was in the 90s when people took a very broad definition of the word gay. Okay? It means something different now, but in the 90s, the word gay meant any man who'd ever read a poem. That's what gay meant in the 90s. I have friends now, younger than me. I think they would say queer identity is a broad spectrum. I don't know if you heard that. Queer identity is a broad spectrum. That may be true, but it's a much narrower spectrum than it used to be. Yeah? It includes lots of things, different gender identities, different sexualities, but it used to include vegetarians. I think if anything, we've narrowed down that definition a little bit. What it was I was always quite sort of gender non-conforming, I guess is what you'd say. You know, I like sort of pop music and sort of nice clothes, and I sort of would sort of express my emotions in a way which stereotypically socially is seen as feminine, but I don't think it should be. But that's the sort of way society treats those things as feminine. There's lots of research actually that autistic people are generally more gender non-conforming than non-autistic people. Although I put it the other way around. I think non-autistic people can have very fixed ideas about gender. They think men should be a certain way, women should be a certain way. We shouldn't ever change those things. They should be sort of very fixed. I do think that non-autistic people, I think they can be very fixed about gender. Not all of you, obviously. My brother, for example, he is also my sister. He has a very fluid gender identity, very progressive. But generally, I do find that, you know, we've got friends who live nearby. They're not autistic, but lovely. And they will say stuff about gender that just like blows my mind. It's just, I think it's just really important to them. Gender is important to them in a way that's not important to me. It troubles them a lot, you know. They're worried recently. They've got a daughter, very worried about, she's been bought a top as a present, and the mum's worried about that, and she goes, it says unisex on the label. It's got a dinosaur on the front, but I think that's okay. I didn't know what to say to that. I've got enough social sense to know that I can't say what I'm thinking in that situation. Which, by the way, was, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck is wrong with you? Do you think all dinosaurs were boys? Is that what you think? Do you think that's why they died out? There's no asteroid, just a breeding problem. Is that what you think? But I was always made fun of sort of being a bit different and unusual. By the way, I say that I'm heterosexual. I've realised recently that I'm bisexual, or something that I've sort of come to realise. I'm attracted to women and President Zelensky of Ukraine. Those are the two, you know, the two main genders. They're the ones I'm into. I think that's true for anyone who thought they were heterosexual 2 years ago, right? That man does something to me, and it's ironic, because Vladimir Putin, right, he's very homophobic, hates gay people, but if he hadn't invaded Ukraine, I wouldn't know who Zelensky was, and I'd still be heterosexual, so he's creating new gay people every day. But I was always sort of picked on for being, stuff that came naturally to me, I sort of was picked on for that, you know. But ironically, the whole time growing up, I was always told to be myself. At least once a week, people say to me, just be yourself, Joe, just be yourself. That's the thing people say when people are struggling. They go, just be yourself, 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 just be yourself. And then I was myself, and they went, oh, no, not like that. No. Be yourself, but more eye contact and small talk, please. We don't like that version of yourself. Always told to be myself. Get told to loosen up a lot. People tell me to loosen up when I think I'm doing fine. They go, loosen up, Joe, just loosen up. Worst time it happened to me was about 3 or 4 years ago now. I get an email through that is inviting me to do a gig. It says, hi, Joe, will you do a gig for Jeremy Corbyn? Right? And I was confused by that, because Jeremy Corbyn, that is not a charity. That is a man. He was leader of the Labour Party at the time, but what is this gig? Is this a benefit gig, or is this literally a gig for Jeremy Corbyn? Like a weird one-on-one comedy lap dance. Just me and an elderly socialist. I didn't know whether I was going to do this gig or not, but then I read down the email and it said Paul Weller is on, and I said, yes. Yeah, I'll do a gig with Paul Weller. I don't care what it is. We're going to have me and Paul Weller, one on each knee. I don't care. Looking forward to this. Don't care what the money's for. We could be raising money for ISIS. I don't care. I get to do a gig with Paul Weller. Very, very excited about this. A week before the show, the running order comes through. It was at the Dome in Brighton. I was under the assumption that there would be one running order, one stage. Me and Paul Weller would be on the same stage, not necessarily at the same time, but maybe he'd bring me on at one point, we'd do a little duet, I don't know. Just sort of workshop it, really. And I get the running order. There's 2 running orders. There's the main stage where Paul Weller and all the famous bands are on, and then there's what they are calling the foyer bar stage, where Joe Wells is on, right? This works. This is like one of the nicest comedy clubs in the country, nicest rooms for comedy. We're all facing the same way as lights. It works as a way to do comedy, right? Imagine if I tried to do the same show in the foyer bar area out there whilst you were nipping out to get a drink to go back in to see a different show. It'd just be a really different vibe, wouldn't it? You quickly run out to get a pint of beer. I'm trying to talk to you about dog cum. That's no longer a comedy show, and it was horrible, this gig. Absolutely horrible. I've got to do 15 minutes of stand-up between each band. That's a long time to people who aren't just disinterested, but are actively angry with you. They're trying to buy a pint and I'm trying to do comedy. It was horrible. The bands are getting annoyed with me because I think I'm just sort of antagonising the audience. I don't mean to, but it's a horrible atmosphere. One band takes pity on me. The lead singer of the band comes up to me. He grabs me by the shoulders and he goes, "Loosen up!" And then he says, "my," and then, there's no good way of saying this, he affectionately called me the N-word, right? He was black, by the way. He wasn't just a very confused racist. He was saying it in the sort of hip-hop sense, like as a sort of term of endearment. I don't know if you've ever been a liberal white person getting called the N-word by a black guy after being told to loosen up. Does not loosen you up, no. No, I think I'm tighter than I've ever been in my life. This is a very, very uncomfortable situation. I've got to say something bad, but I can't say that bad, but I've got to say something bad. What do I say back? I don't know why I did this. I panicked. I said, "Thank you, sir." That's what happens. Always getting told to loosen up all the time. I think I'm fine. I hate loosen up. I really hate it as a thing people say. Loosen up is the opposite of the social model of disability, right? So loosen up is you got to fit in with all of this sort of chaotic stuff, right? And the social model of disability, a guy called Mike Holver came up with that, right? So he used a wheelchair, and he said the main barrier in his life wasn't the fact that he used a wheelchair, but it was the fact that society didn't expect people to use wheelchairs, so there was sort of barriers put in place that stopped him from getting on with his life. I think that's a really important and powerful way of looking at any sort of disability conversation. You know, it flips it around and makes you think about society rather than it being the individual. I think about the social model of disability at least once a year when I'm watching cross-country skiing, which I'm obsessed with cross-country skiing. I think it's incredible. I can't believe it's a real sport. If you haven't seen it, it's exactly what you're imagining in your head. They're all set up to go skiing, but instead of going down a slope, they're doing their skiing through the woods uphill. It looks ridiculous. It's amazing. I'm obsessed with it. I love to watch cross-country skiing. It takes them ages, goes on for hours. I like to watch it. I saw one check their watch one time. I've never seen an Olympic athlete do that. You know, Tom Daley, halfway down a dive, doesn't go, "Oh, fucking hell," like that. Cross-country skiing is incredible. And the first time I saw it, I saw the cross-country skiers and I thought, they are rubbish. Rubbish skiers. How embarrassing. This is on television and they're doing their rubbish skiing. It's embarrassing for them. I can't believe it. But then I thought about it a little bit. Maybe they're not rubbish skiers. They could be the best skiers in the world. If you put those same skiers on a ski slope, they could be brilliant. But they've been forced to do their skiing through the woods because of some sort of admin error. I don't know how you become a cross-country skier. That's the social model of disability. We know where skiers are meant to be. And if we put them in the wrong environment, they can struggle. But we don't know what that environment would look like for autistic people. What would be the environment, the world for autistic people that would look like the equivalent of the ski slopes? I've got no answers. I've got a few ideas, obviously. I think clothes shops would be very different. We wouldn't organise the clothes by gender. We don't believe in that. We would organise all the clothes by how they feel around your neck. That's how we're reshaping H&M. I think that should be like a political aim for autistic people. That should be what we want. We want to create a world where we feel like we're on the ski slopes, a world that works for us as autistic people, you know. I realized that it was ridiculous that because I had a funny video that sort of was giving me a platform to talk about being autistic. But now that it's happened, it feels like there's a responsibility on me to say something because some people are listening to me. And it's rare that one of us gets to talk. Rare that autistic people get to talk about autism. See stuff on the news about autism. It's never autistic people, you know. It's one of two groups. So sometimes you get scientists. They get to go on the news, talk about autism. I think they get things wrong more than they get things right. I understand why the people on the internet thought there couldn't be a comedian who was also autistic. There's a stereotype that autistic people don't understand humor and jokes. We know where that comes from. It comes from a man called Hans Asperger. He was a scientist who worked for the German government in the 1930s and 40s in Germany. He worked for the government, sort of late 1930s, early 1940s. He worked for the German government of the time in their pioneering work with disabled people. And I don't know if you've ever been told that you don't have a good sense of humour by an actual Nazi. I don't take that criticism seriously, but loads of scientists have written that since. There's been scientific papers that have said, you know, autistic people don't understand humour and jokes. How have they come to that conclusion? What's the experiment that's come to that conclusion? How have they tested that? They've told some autistic people some jokes. The autistic people haven't laughed at their jokes, and then they've added that to the diagnostic criteria. I'm not allowed to do that. I wish I could do that as a comedian. That'd be brilliant. If I tell you all the jokes today and just none of you laugh, I've got to go away and think about that. I'll get edges out of the show, but I've got to think about the wording, think about the delivery, think about how where I put the joke in the show. What I'm not allowed to do is tell you all a load of jokes, have none of you laugh, then go back there and go, oh, they didn't laugh at those jokes. The only explanation is they all had some sort of disability that prevented them from understanding my brilliant comedy. The other group you get on TV is you get the parents of autistic children. They get to go on the news, talk about autism, right? Now, there's some really good parents of autistic children speaking up for their kids, and they're brilliant, right? But I think there's a difference between speaking up for and speaking for, you know? And I think there's some sort of complicated stuff with parent show, because occasionally I will hear stuff that's really upsetting from the parents of autistic children. You know, just being a parent doesn't always mean you're on our side. Went to a barbecue last year. My friends got kids, all our friends got kids, we're having a good time in the barbecue. Getting later in the day, it's one family's turn to leave. Little boy in the family says goodbye. This is how he says goodbye. See what you think of this, right? He goes, "Goodbye, kids and grown-ups." I think that's lovely. I think that's a lovely way to say goodbye. Then his mum goes, "No, say it properly." And the little boy goes, "Goodbye, kids and grown-ups." And then his mum says, "I'm sorry about him. He has autism, but it's not severe autism," right? Let's unpack what's being said there. She's apologizing for him saying goodbye in a way that at worst is unusual, but I think it's a really cool way to say goodbye. Then she's saying he has autism, but it's not severe autism. I hate the word severe, right? Not because I think all autistic people are the same, because I don't think any of us are bad. And the word severe means worse. And it really upset me, you know? I didn't want to have an argument at this barbecue, but it really, really, really got to me. It really upset me that someone would talk about someone like me that way. And maybe I should have said something. Another reason I didn't say anything, English wasn't her first language. I think it makes it a little bit more complicated, like correcting someone's language when it's not their first language, yeah. She was French, but not severely French. She had a very mild form of the condition. I mean, to be honest, she said she was French. I couldn't see anything wrong with her, really. She just... to me, she just looked normal, but... You know, she says she's French, and you have to believe them, don't you? Even though a lot of people are saying they're French these days. It's sort of fashionable, isn't it? But, you know, you can't say anything. But, I think we're all a little bit French when it comes down to it. That's the thing I think. But so there's a responsibility on me to say something where I've got like a bit of a platform, and it's rare for one of us to get to speak, right? But also, I don't want to overcrowd the space, because there's lots of autistic people speaking up for us now, and it's sort of a growing movement. Don't want to overcrowd the space, but I've got to say something. So I've thought really hard about what I've got to say with the platform that I've got. I've thought about it hard, and I've got one thing I'm going to say. I'm going to say one thing. It's the most important thing in the whole show. It's the one thing that I have to say. I'm going to say it to the autistic people in the room. This is the most important thing I have to say to you, autistic people, as your leader. This is what I have to say. This is what I have to say to you. I've thought about it a lot. This is what I have to say. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. But not in the way they say just be yourself. Properly be yourself. Work out what yourself is, and then lean into that and be yourself. Even when people tell you to be yourself, just say, I am being myself, and keep being yourself. Because for us, to be ourselves is a really radical thing to do. You know, there's billions and billions of pounds put into stopping autistic people from being themselves. So many treatments and things like that, they boil down to how do we stop autistic people being themselves? Lots of research, I think you can boil down to that. It's a big research project has been put on pause at the moment called Spectrum 10K. Right? It's a multi-million-pound university, Cambridge University research project. If you go on their website, there's an FAQ section. One of the FAQs is, do you support eugenics? And their answer is no, we're against eugenics. Okay, but it's not reassuring, do you know what I mean? Why is that a frequently asked question about your project? It's a bit like if I invited you around for dinner and I made you a lasagna, and as I gave you the lasagna, I went, here are some frequently asked questions about my cooking. Number 1, does it have any dog cum in it? There is no dog cum in this, no. No, we got it all refunded, it's good. What it is, the reason it's controversial is because they're trying to find the genetic cause of autism, right? A lot of research boils down to that. It's not how do we help people to be happier, healthier, communicate, how do we help change the world to be more accessible for people. It's what's the cause of autism, right? And I hate that that's the first question that researchers want to ask, you know? Like, that's why I say I'm autistic. I don't have autism. It's a thing I am. It's not a thing I have. So when you research the cause of autism, you're researching the cause of me, which I think is offensive. It's a bit like if you had a one-night stand with someone, and when they first saw your naked body, their immediate response was, what's caused this? Not a good start. I know it's easy for me to say just be yourself, right? Because I'm like a white man who works in the arts, right? For me, relatively easy for me to sort of be myself, more so than other people. For some autistic people, very difficult to be themselves. For some autistic people, it's dangerous to be themselves. I can't tell all autistic people to be themselves. Some of them will be putting themselves at risk by being themselves. There has to be an add-on to that, right? People should be themselves, but we also need to have allies and people working together to create a world where everybody gets to be themselves. That has to be a thing we work together to do and to create that world where we all get to be ourselves. And I don't want to be pious about that, you know, because I've been on the wrong side of it loads of times. There's loads of stuff I regret where I haven't helped people to be themselves. One that really sticks with me, I used to work for a youth group for young autistic people. I remember one day a new person comes to the group. I can see they're very nervous. I can also see that they like heavy metal music because they've got a T-shirt with a heavy metal band on the front. And they had a jacket, and they had all heavy metal bands all over the jacket. So I knew they liked heavy metal music. And they had jeans as well that had heavy metal bands all over the jeans. So I was like, he likes heavy metal music. He had a bag as well that had like Slayer and Metallica and stuff like that. This guy likes heavy metal music. You only really see that with heavy metal, don't you? It's the only... That genre has nailed merch. People who like classical music don't wear leather jackets that say Beethoven will never die on the back. I'd like that if they did. And I can see he's come to the group for the first time, doesn't know anyone. That's a very nerve-wracking thing, very brave to come to a group where you don't know anyone for the first time. I can see he likes heavy metal music. I know heavy metal music. I go up to him, I talked to him about heavy metal music. I said, hey, you like heavy metal music. I like heavy metal music too. What is your favorite heavy metal band? And he tells me that his favorite heavy metal band is a band called Cannibal Corpse, right? Who I'm sure you're all aware of their work. They did that song Skull Full of Maggots. Do you remember that? Remember that? Yeah. Hammer Smashed Face, we all know that? Yeah, that was one of theirs, yeah. Dog Cum Refund, that was not one of theirs. They're the hits. But they had a sort of formula, Cannibal Corpse. They're a 90s death metal band where the formula was that all the song titles were the most offensive and violent things imaginable, but they had a singing style that meant you couldn't tell what any of the lyrics were anyway. So it didn't matter, you know? They could be just reading out the Lib Dem manifesto for all we know. He starts telling me about Cannibal Corpse, and as he's telling me about it, his whole demeanor changes, you know? He's confident. He's talking passionately about the thing that he really loves and the thing he knows everything about. When he walked in, he looked like a cross-country skier. Now he looks like he's on the ski slopes. He talks to me passionately about his favourite Cannibal Corpse song, which is a song called I Come Blood. Which, it's a sort of ballad. I want to hear about it. I love that song. I think it's great. But I become self-conscious. I'm not the only person who works at this youth group. I've got a manager. There's other members of staff there. I'm aware that some of the things he's saying, if they've just heard like a little bit of this conversation, it might sound bad out of context, you know? And I don't want my manager to call me in. We have to have another meeting about safeguarding. So I panicked when he said, I come blood. And in that panic, I went, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. And as those words came out of my mouth, I heard the words of every adult when I was a child. Don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. Don't say that. Don't ask that question. Don't move like that. Don't be so loud. Don't be so quiet. Don't do that. Don't wear those clothes. Don't move like that. Don't be so still. Don't look away. Don't say that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't. Just be yourself. I realize now why it was difficult to say what it's like being autistic. Because I only experienced that in its sort of pure form when I was very, very young. And then all the adults came in and said, don't do that, don't. And I gave myself all the different rules. It didn't make me not autistic, but it sort of dented the autisticness. So it wasn't what it could have been. It became something sort of distorted. To answer what it's like being autistic, I have to remember when I was really, really young, there's little things where I go, yeah, that was it. That's what it's like being autistic. And it's not stuff you'd expect. It's unusual things where I thought differently to other people, and it just sort of came at things from a different angle. One of them I remember very fondly. I was about 8 years old. We had an assembly at my school. The assembly was this, that a local man owned a tortoise, and he brought the tortoise in to the school. That would happen in the 90s. They didn't have DBS checks back then. In the 90s, if you owned an exotic pet, you had access to any primary school in the country. It's a very different time. Don't worry, this story's not as dark as it sounds like it might be going. It was a good assembly. Met a real-life tortoise, learn what tortoises eat. We learn about hibernation. Amazing. At the end of the assembly is a Q&A. First question, what is the tortoise's name? The man who owns the tortoise tells us that she doesn't have a name. She's almost 100 years old, this tortoise, but she's never been given a name. It was decided there and then that we'd have a competition in the school to name the tortoise. And the winner of that competition, that name would become her tortoise name for the rest of her tortoise life. I was about 8 years old, but I knew that was a good prize. I thought really hard about what to name the tortoise. And I suggested we name her Padnell Infant School, which was the name of the school that we all went to. My reason was this. I said if we name her Padnell Infant School, every time she hears her name, it'll be a lovely reminder of that day. She hasn't had a particularly exciting life. She just lives in a box in a man's house. But one day, she went to Padnell Infant School. Maybe the best day of her tortoise life. Every time she hears her name, lovely reminder of that day. Even on the last day, when she's put down to hibernate for the last time, she knows she may never wake up again from that cold winter. Her owner would say to her, good night, Padnell Infant School. She'd hear her name. She'd remember that day, meeting all the children. That'd be her last thought on this earth. I know that's a weird name for a tortoise, right? I was a weird little autistic child, but I put to you that that's a beautiful name for a tortoise. I think it's beautiful and unusual, it's poetic, it's not like any other tortoise name. I thought differently to all the other children, and because I thought differently, I came up with something unusual like that. All of the conversations we hear about neurodiversity, the arguments for neurodiversity, they're almost like economic arguments. People say, well, if we allow autistic people to unlock their special autistic superpowers, they'd be good at maths, good at science, we could have more Temple Grandins, more Alan Turings. I do think that is true. But I think a more important argument for neurodiversity is this. If we allow everyone to be themselves, to properly be themselves, we'll have more things like that tortoise story. Everyone will think differently and make the world a more beautiful and exciting place. Anyway, long story short, I came second to some cunt who wrote Shelley. Shelley. Still think about it every day. I'm sorry that the show ends on a story of injustice, but usually at the end, I would play a piece of music by a composer called Alex Webster. The piece is called I Come Blood. It's performed by the band Cannibal Corpse. But where we are recording this to be put on the internet, we can't use the copyrighted music. So what I did was I phoned up the brilliant comedian Robert White, and I described the song to him and asked him to record a version of the song based on my description. So I'm just going to play that for you now, please. If you could play the video, that'd be great.
Hello, Joe. This is the song you wanted. It's death metal. Well, I don't know if it is death metal. I tried to research death metal, but it's fucking loud. So this is influenced by death in that it's got A minor in it, which is the Funeral March by Chopin. So maybe death metal has got a Chopin influence. I didn't really look into it. But if death metal has got a Chopin influence, this song is what you want. If it hasn't, go fuck yourself. Here we go. This is death metal. This is a story of a rare medical condition and an average John, the most ordinary bloke. An average hair, an average build, average 5'11", from the most boring average town, Basingstoke, shithole by the sea. But the average stopped at puberty when he started to develop, but not like boys should. 'Cause when he gave himself head, it came out scarlet red. And although he could never bloody come, when he come, he bled. Would he die? Would he live? Was it blood? Was it jizz? Somehow his sack's off, 'cause when he whacks off, he haemophiliacs off. Comes blood, his gum's a riddle, a mystery. When he fiddles, his jizz makes history. Who can say if a moment cock play will wank his life away? Comes blood. He held his breath for the wank of death, the most dangerous danger wank ever, and had loneliness until he met a vampiress. And now they've settled down together. He slowly turned his life around with 6 freaky kids and a vampire settling down. Although unfortunately she's a vampire, and nature had her do what she would do. And what started off in sucking ended up in more a chew, until she couldn't get enough and bit his penis straight off. And the last thing John saw, as the life from his veins did pump, was his wife's disappointed face. 'Cause while he could come blood, he was bleeding spunk. First go, +1 cut. Hope that is death metal, because I'm not listening to that shit, I have you know.
White. I think when he whacks off, he haemophiliacs off is worth the ticket price alone. Do follow Robert. He's an incredible comedian, Robert White. He's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for coming in with Joe Wells. Good night.